Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. I bet if you wore a dress, nobody would ever guess you'd been a guy. Ryan. That was Jake for you. Always pushing, always prodding, always trying to crack the shell I'd spent 22 years carefully building around myself. We'd been best friends since we were 5, a classic case of opposites attracting. He was the human megaphone, the life of every party. I was the guy in the corner, a ghost in a gray hoodie, with headphones permanently clamped over my ears as a shield against small talk. I made my living as a freelance graphic designer, a job that suited me perfectly because it required interacting with clients almost exclusively through email. My uniform was jeans, a hoodie, and a perpetual look of wanting to be anywhere else. So when Jake dangled that little piece of bait, my automatic response was a flat no. "Come on, man," he pleaded, his eyes sparkling with the kind of mischief that always ended with me in some deeply uncomfortable situation. "It's Mark's birthday party. The theme is masquerade. It's perfect. You can go as someone else. Someone prettier." Not funny. "Jake." I didn't look up from my laptop, trying to project an impenetrable wall of focus. "I'm serious. I'll even sweeten the deal. You do it, and I'll buy you coffee for a whole week. The expensive stuff you like, not that diner sludge." I paused. A week of free lattes from the daily grind was tempting. I had to admit, it was a small luxury I rarely afforded myself. But the cost was my dignity. I imagined myself in a dress, clumsy and awkward, a parody of a woman. The thought made my skin crawl. Forget it. Of course, with Jake. Forget it is just the starting point for negotiations. 2 hours later, he showed up at my apartment door with a large, suspiciously light shopping bag. "What's that?" I asked, eyeing it with deep suspicion. "Your ticket to a week of caffeinated bliss," he announced, striding past me into my living room and dumping the contents onto my sofa. It was a cascade of soft, alien materials. A whisper of pastel pink fabric resolved itself into a cocktail dress, simple and elegant. Beside it lay a wig of shimmering, golden blonde hair, so realistic it seemed to catch the light on its own. There were a pair of strappy silver high heels that looked like instruments of torture, and, to my horror, a full makeup kit. "You're insane," I stated, backing away as if the pile of feminine paraphernalia might be contagious. "I'm a visionary," Jake corrected, holding up the dress. "This will fit. I guessed your size. And look," he said, dangling the wig. Instant glamour. I just stood there, speechless. Part of me was genuinely appalled, but another, much smaller, much quieter part was curious. I had spent my entire life trying to be invisible. The idea of being someone else, someone so radically different, was both terrifying and strangely alluring. "Just for one night, Ryan," Jake said, his tone softening. He knew he was winning. "You go to the party, you stay for an hour, and then you can come home and wash it all off. No one will even know it's you. Think of it as an experiment." An experiment. That word somehow made it feel less humiliating. It sounded scientific, detached, before I could fully process what I was agreeing to. Jake had steered me into the bathroom. "All right," he said, clapping his hands together. "Time for the makeover." He sat me down on the closed toilet lid and laid out the cosmetics on the counter with the focus of a surgeon. I'd never been this close to makeup before. The little pots and brushes looked impossibly complex. "First, foundation," he announced, squirting a cool beige liquid onto a sponge. The sensation of him dabbing it onto my face was bizarre. It felt like a mask being painted on, cool and slightly damp, smelling faintly of chemicals and flowers. He worked with a surprising gentleness, blending it over my jaw, my nose, my forehead, until the faint stubble I had was just a memory. Next came the eyebrows. He plucked a few stray hairs, each one a tiny, sharp sting, before shaping them with a dark pencil. "You've got good brows, man," he muttered, concentrating. "Just need a little definition." The eyeliner was the worst part. "Hold still," he commanded, and I squeezed my eyes shut as he traced a delicate black line along my upper lash line. It tickled, and I was convinced he was going to stab me in the eye when he told me to open them. The effect was startling. My eyes. normally just plain brown, looked bigger, deeper, framed by the dark line. He followed up with an eyelash curler, a terrifying metal contraption, and a few coats of mascara. I could feel the weight of it on my lashes. The lipstick was last. He chose a classic, vibrant red. The stick felt cool and waxy as he glided it across my lips. "Don't purse them," he instructed. The sensation was undeniably sensual, a smooth, slick coating on a part of my body I never paid much attention to. Then came the dress. "Strip," Jake ordered, turning around to give me some privacy. I peeled off my hoodie and jeans, feeling foolishly exposed in just my boxers. The dress was made of a slinky, satin-like material. It slid over my head and settled around my body, clinging in ways my usual clothes never did. The fabric was cool and smooth against my skin, and the feeling of it brushing against my legs was entirely foreign. It ended just above my knees, exposing more of myself than I was used to. The hardest part was the underwear. Jake had bought a padded bra and a pair of silky panties. Putting them on felt like crossing a sacred, invisible line. The fake cleavage created by the bra was laughable, yet oddly convincing under the dress. Finally, the wig. He settled the cap of golden hair onto my head, adjusting it until my own dark hair was completely hidden. He fluffed the synthetic strands, which fell in soft waves just past my shoulders. The last touch was a spritz of perfume. A light, floral scent enveloped me, a smell so completely not me that it made my head spin. "Okay," he said, stepping back to admire his handiwork. "Now the shoes." Getting my feet into the silver heels was a feat of engineering. My feet felt pinched and crushed, and when I tried to stand, I wobbled precariously, my entire body pitched forward at an unnatural angle. I grabbed onto the sink to steady myself. "You get used to it," Jake said with a shrug, though I didn't believe him for a second. Now, the big reveal. He turned me to face the full-length mirror on the back of the door. I braced myself. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. The person in the mirror was a stranger, a girl. She was pretty, with smooth skin, wide, dark eyes, and full red lips. The blonde hair softened the angles of my face, and the pink dress clung to a figure that was slender and surprisingly feminine. For a split second, my brain failed to connect that reflection with myself. It was just some girl in my bathroom. Then the girl tilted her head, and I felt the movement in my own neck. The illusion shattered, and a wave of vertigo washed over me. That was me. That was my face under all that paint, my body inside that dress. Jake let out a low whistle. "Damn, Ryan, I was right. No one would ever know," he grinned. "We just need a name for you. How about Rihanna?" I couldn't answer. I just stared at my reflection, a mix of horror and a strange, illicit thrill coiling in my stomach. The girl in the mirror looked fragile, but her eyes held a spark of something I didn't recognize in myself. "Ready to go?" Rihanna Jake asked, holding the door open. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I took my first clumsy step in the heels. The cool night air hit my bare legs as I walked out of my apartment, a shiver running up my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. It was a cocktail of embarrassment, anxiety, and a terrifying shot of anticipation. I didn't know it then, but Ryan had just left the building, and as the door clicked shut behind me, I had a sinking feeling that he might not be coming back. The joke was just beginning, and somehow, I already knew it wasn't going to end when the night was over. The party was in full swing by the time we arrived. Mark had rented out a small event space downtown, and the place was pulsing with music and awash in a kaleidoscope of colored lights. Almost everyone was wearing a mask, adding an air of elegant mystery to the scene. My own mask was a simple silver one that matched my shoes, covering the top half of my face. In a way, it was a relief, another layer of disguise between me and the world. As soon as Jake and I stepped through the door, heads turned, or rather, they turned towards me. I instinctively shrank behind Jake's shoulder, my heart hammering against my ribs. But the stares weren't hostile or mocking. They were curious, appreciative. I saw a few guys nudge their friends, their eyes lingering on my dress, my legs. It was an entirely new kind of attention, and I had no idea what to do with it. "See," Jake murmured, his voice close to my ear. "You're a hit. Just relax." He led me towards the bar. his hand resting lightly on the small of my back. The gesture felt possessive, proprietary, and I realized people weren't just looking at me. They were looking at me as Jake's date. They saw a couple of the loud, charming guy and his pretty, quiet girlfriend. The thought was so absurd it was almost funny. "What can I get for you and your lovely companion?" the bartender asked, giving me a warm smile. "I'll have a beer, and she'll have a vodka soda," Jake answered for me, before I could even open my mouth to squeak out an order. I took the cold glass, the condensation chilling my fingers. I took a tentative sip, the alcohol a sharp, clean bite. Normally, I would have found a dark corner to lurk in, nursing a single beer for the entire night. But tonight I wasn't Ryan. I was Rihanna, and Rihanna, it seemed, was the center of attention. People from Jake's wider circle of friends came over to say hi. They clapped him on the back, and then their eyes would slide over to me. "Jake, you didn't tell us you were bringing someone I met," one guy said, extending a hand. I shook it, my grip weak and my palm suddenly sweaty. "Rihanna," I managed to say, my voice coming out breathier and higher than usual, a nervous reflex. "Rihanna, beautiful name," he said, his smile unwavering. They bought it, every single one of them. They saw a girl, and so they heard a girl's voice. The power of suggestion was terrifyingly effective. I spent the next hour in a daze. I was terrified, yes, but beneath the fear was a feeling I could only describe as lightness, as Ryan. I felt heavy, weighed down by my own self-consciousness. Every interaction was a calculation, every word a struggle. But as Rihanna, I was a blank slate. No one had any expectations of me beyond smiling and looking pretty. And for the first time in my life, I found that I could do that. I listened to their stories, nodded at the right moments, and even managed a few small, genuine smiles. The mask and the costume gave me a strange kind of courage. The true test came when Mark, the birthday boy himself, swaggered over. "Jake, there you are. And who is this?" "Mark, this is Rihanna," Jake said smoothly. "Rihanna, Mark." "Wow," Mark said, his eyes doing a quick up and down scan. "Jake, you always manage to find the gorgeous ones. It's a pleasure to meet you." "Rihanna." He leaned in and gave me a kiss on the cheek. His 5 o'clock shadow rasped against my smoothly made-up skin, and the scent of his cologne was overpowering. My entire body went rigid. He didn't seem to notice. The music shifted from a pounding dance track to something slower, a moody pop song with a heavy bass line. "Would you like to dance?" Mark asked, his eyes fixed on mine. Panic seized me. My mind screamed no, dancing in these heels with a man. It was a trifecta of horror. I looked desperately at Jake, but he just gave me a subtle nod, a silent push out of the nest. Before I could formulate an excuse, Mark had taken my hand, his grip warm and firm, and was leading me to the small dance floor. He pulled me close, one hand finding the small of my back, the other holding my hand. My heart was a trapped bird beating frantically against my ribs. I had never been this close to another man before. Not in this way. It wasn't a rough and tumble hug or a friendly slap on the shoulder. This was different. This was intimate. I stumbled, my ankles screaming in protest at the heels. "Sorry," I mumbled. "I'm not a great dancer." "Just follow my lead," he said, his voice a low rumble near my ear. His breath was warm against my neck. A shiver, completely involuntary, traced its way down my spine. We swayed awkwardly to the music. I kept my eyes fixed on a point over his shoulder, focusing on just putting one foot in front of the other without falling flat on my face. But I couldn't ignore the sensations, the feeling of his chest, hard and solid, brushing against the soft, padded cups of my bra, the pressure of his hand on my back, guiding me, the heat radiating from his body. It was all so foreign, so overwhelming. My entire life, physical contact had been something to be avoided, but this felt different. Buried deep under the mountain of anxiety was a flicker of something else, a strange, unfamiliar warmth spreading through my chest. He smelled good. His hand on my back felt nice, secure. I risked a glance up at his face. Through the holes in his mask, his eyes were kind. He was smiling down at me, a genuine, friendly smile. And without thinking, I found myself smiling back. It wasn't a forced, polite smile. It was real. As the song ended, he didn't let go right away. "You're a great dancer," he lied smoothly, "and you have a beautiful smile." "Thank you," I whispered, the words feeling alien in my own mouth. We walked back to the bar, and I felt as though I had just run a marathon. The single vodka soda had gone straight to my head, and the world felt fuzzy at the edges. I felt light, almost giddy. Being Rihanna was like playing a video game. The stakes didn't feel real. She could talk to people, she could dance, she could smile at handsome men, and it was all okay. None of the crippling self-doubt that plagued Ryan seemed to apply to her. Jake was watching me from a distance, leaning against a pillar with his beer. His usual smug grin was gone, replaced by an expression I couldn't quite read. It looked like surprise, mixed with something else, something softer, as my eyes met his. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod of approval. For some reason, that simple gesture meant more to me than any of the compliments I'd received from strangers. The rest of the night passed in a blur of music, conversation, and a second drink. I talked more than I had in the past year combined. I laughed at jokes, my laugh sounding high and melodic in the noisy room. I felt pretty, for the first time in my life. I felt the strange power that came with it, the way men's eyes followed me, the way women complimented my dress. It was intoxicating. It was well past midnight when Jake finally decided it was time to go. The walk back to his car was quiet. The click-clack of my heels on the pavement was the only sound. The cool air felt good on my flushed skin. Back in the safety of my own apartment, the silence was deafening. Jake had dropped me off with a simple, "See, told you it'd be fine," and a quick, unreadable smile. I leaned against the closed door, my entire body humming with a strange energy. I felt exhausted but also wired, my mind replaying the night's events. I walked into the bathroom and flipped on the light, half expecting the magic to have worn off, to see plain old Ryan staring back at me. But Rihanna was still there. Her blonde hair was a little messy, her red lipstick slightly faded, but her eyes looked different. They were shining, alive. I reached up and slowly took off the mask. Then I just stared. I stared for a long, long time. At the face that was mine but not mine. At the girl who had spent the night living a life I never could. A single question echoed in the quiet of my apartment, whispered into the still air. Who am I? The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a mouth that felt like it was stuffed with cotton. My first coherent thought was that I had to get this ridiculous costume off. The party was over. The joke was done. I sat up, my head swimming, and immediately reached for the wig. My fingers fumbled at my hairline, searching for the edge of the netting. I found it and pulled. A sharp, searing pain shot through my scalp. Ow, I yelped, my eyes watering. I tried again, more carefully this time, trying to peel it back. It was no use. The wig felt like it was glued to my head. Every tug sent a fresh wave of agony across my scalp. It was as if the synthetic fibers had somehow fused with my skin, each strand individually rooted. A cold knot of dread began to form in my stomach. This wasn't right. I stumbled out of bed and into the bathroom, my heart starting to race. I leaned over the sink, turned on the cold tap, and splashed water on my face, hoping to shock myself into full wakefulness. This had to be a dream. But when I looked up, the girl from last night was still there, albeit a much more disheveled version. Her mascara was smudged, creating faint gray circles under her eyes, but the red lipstick? It was still perfectly, vibrantly red. I grabbed a washcloth, lathered it with soap, and started scrubbing at my lips. I scrubbed until my skin was raw and red, but the color wouldn't budge. It wasn't a layer of makeup on my skin. It was the color of my skin. My lips were just red. "No," I whispered, my voice cracking. It came out wrong, higher, softer. I cleared my throat and tried again. "Hello?" The voice that answered was not mine. It was a clear, feminine voice, shaky with panic but undeniably female. A scream built in my chest, but it caught in my throat, emerging as a strangled gasp. My eyes darted around my own reflection, searching for any sign of myself, of Ryan. My jawline, which always had a squared edge, seemed softer, more tapered. My Adam's apple was gone. My shoulders, usually broad and slightly slumped, looked narrower, more delicate. With trembling hands, I gripped the hem of the pink dress I had passed out in and pulled it over my head. I stood there in the bra and panties Jake had bought me, staring at my reflection in utter horror. My chest was no longer flat. 2 small, soft mounds of flesh had appeared, sensitive and real. Straining against the lace of the bra, my waist nipped in before flaring out into hips that were distinctly wider and rounder than they had been 24 hours ago. My skin was smooth, almost poreless, with no trace of the scattered hair that had always been on my chest and stomach. I looked down, my hands shaking so violently I had to grip the edge of the sink to stay upright. The final, undeniable proof was there. Everything was different. Everything was gone, replaced. I was a girl, a real biological girl. "This can't be happening," I chanted, my voice a hysterical whisper. "This isn't real. It's a dream. It's a hallucination." My phone was on my nightstand. I snatched it up, my fingers fumbling with the screen, and called the only person I could. "Jake," I sobbed into the phone when he finally picked up, his voice thick with sleep. "Ryan, dude, what's wrong? You sound weird." "It won't come off." "Jake," I cried, the words tumbling out in a panicked rush. "The wig, the makeup, it won't come off. It's real. It's all real." "Whoa, slow down. What are you talking about? Are you still drunk?" "No, just get over here, please." The 20 minutes it took for Jake to arrive were the longest of my life. I paced my small apartment, wrapping my arms around myself, the feel of my own soft skin a constant, terrifying reminder. When the doorbell finally rang, I threw it open. Jake took one look at me and his sleepy expression vanished, replaced by confusion. "Okay, very funny. You're really committing to this. Huh, the joke's over. Man." "It's not a joke," I insisted, grabbing his arm and pulling him inside. "Look," I tilted my head, showing him my hairline. "Try and take it off, please." He looked skeptical, but he reached out and gently tugged at a lock of the blonde hair. I flinched as pain shot through my scalp. Jake's eyes widened. He touched my cheek, his fingers brushing against the impossibly smooth skin. He stared into my eyes, and I could see the exact moment his disbelief crumbled and was replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. "No way," he breathed, stepping back. This is impossible." We had to find an explanation, a rational one. The first place we thought of was the costume shop. Jake had mentioned he bought everything from a new place that had opened up downtown, a little hole-in-the-wall store called Metamorphosis. But when we got there, the storefront was empty. A faded "for lease" sign was taped to the window. The shops on either side had been there for years. Their owners swore there had never been a costume shop between them. It had simply vanished, as if it had never existed at all. Our last resort was the emergency room. I felt a fresh wave of humiliation walking in, dressed in my pink party dress from the night before. Jake trying to explain the situation in hushed, urgent tones to the triage nurse. They must have thought we were on drugs, but they ran the tests. They drew blood, took samples, and did a full physical. We sat in a sterile examination room for what felt like an eternity, finally. A doctor, a kind-looking woman in her 50s with weary eyes, came in, holding a tablet. She didn't look at me. She looked at my chart, her brow furrowed in utter bewilderment. "Well," she began, finally meeting my gaze, "I've been a doctor for 30 years, and I have never seen anything like this." She took a deep breath. "According to every test we've run, you are, for all intents and purposes, biologically and genetically female. Your chromosomes are XX. Your hormone levels are consistent with that of a healthy 22-year-old woman. There is absolutely no medical trace that you were ever male." The clinical, matter-of-fact words struck me with the force of a physical blow. It was official. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't a dream. It was a fact, written in my blood and coded into my very DNA. Ryan was gone. The drive back to my apartment was silent. The city lights blurred past the car window. A world that was suddenly alien to me. I was a tourist in my own life. When we pulled up outside my building, the dam finally broke. A gut-wrenching sob tore its way out of my throat. I hunched over, pressing my face into my hands, and cried. I cried for Ryan, for the life I had lost, For the body that was no longer mine, I cried out of fear and confusion and a profound sense of loneliness. It was the sound of a person whose entire reality had been ripped away from them in a single night. Jake didn't say a word. He just sat there, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white, his face a grim mask of guilt and horror. His stupid, harmless joke had turned into a nightmare, a curse, and we were both trapped inside it. For the first week, I didn't leave my apartment. I locked the door, drew the blinds, and turned my phone off. The world outside ceased to exist. My reflection was my enemy. Every time I accidentally caught a glimpse of myself in a window or the dark screen of my laptop, a jolt of revulsion and panic went through me. That girl with the soft features and wide, frightened eyes was a stranger living in my skin, a constant reminder of everything I had lost. I tried to wear my old clothes, a pair of jeans and a hoodie, but they fit all wrong. The jeans were tight across my new, wider hips and loose at the waist. The hoodie hung off my narrower shoulders like a sack, accentuating how much smaller I had become. Wearing them felt like wearing a costume, a sad, failed attempt to pretend I was still Ryan. But Ryan was gone. In the end, I spent most of my days wrapped in a bed sheet, a shapeless shroud that helped me forget the new curves and contours of the body I was trapped in. Jake was my only link to the outside world. He must have been eaten alive by guilt, because he became my unwilling caretaker. He'd come over every day. Using the spare key I'd given him years ago, he'd leave bags of groceries on the kitchen counter, trying to coax me to eat. "You have to eat something," he'd say, his voice gentle. "I'm not hungry," I'd mumble from my cocoon on the sofa. One day, he came in and didn't bring food. He brought clothes. He laid them out on a chair, a few pairs of soft leggings, some simple t-shirts, and a pack of cotton underwear, all from the women's section. I thought, "These might be more comfortable," he said, avoiding my eyes. I stared at the pile of clothes, a fresh wave of despair washing over me. It felt like a surrender, an admission of defeat, but the thought of putting on my old, ill-fitting jeans was just as bad. With a heavy sigh, I took the leggings and a t-shirt and went into the bedroom to change. The fabric was soft against my skin, stretching to accommodate my new shape. It fit. It was comfortable. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. This body, this female body, was demanding to be treated as such. It was rejecting my old life, my old self, piece by piece. Jake tried his best to help me navigate the new, treacherous landscape of my life. He was clumsy and awkward, but he was there. He showed me how to use a hairbrush on the long, blonde hair that was now irrevocably mine, wincing along with me as I worked through the tangles. He went to the pharmacy and bought tampons and pads, grimly explaining what they were for, his face bright red the entire time. "You're, gonna need these eventually, I guess," he'd stammered, shoving the box into my hands. Slowly, tentatively, I began to learn the basic grammar of being a woman. The daily routines that had once been invisible to me were now essential skills for survival. I learned to tie my hair back in a simple ponytail to keep it out of my face. I discovered that makeup, which I had initially viewed as a symbol of my curse, could also be a kind of armor. A little bit of concealer under my eyes made me look less like a ghost. A touch of mascara made me feel less exposed, more put together. These small acts, which had felt so alien during the makeover, were starting to feel natural. It was as if my body knew what to do, even if my mind was still reeling in protest. Eventually, I had to venture outside. My savings were dwindling, and I had design projects to finish. The first time I walked to the supermarket, I felt like every single person was staring at me. Every glance felt like an accusation, every smile a threat. The world, which had always ignored Ryan, was suddenly hyper-aware of this new girl. Men held doors open for me. An old woman in the produce aisle smiled and called me dear. A teenage boy stocking shelves blushed when I asked him where the pasta was. The way people spoke to me was different. They were gentler, sometimes a little condescending. They explained things to me that I already knew. It was infuriating and deeply unsettling. But there were other times, too. Times when a friendly smile from a stranger made me feel a little less alone. Times when the simple act of being seen, of being acknowledged, felt Nice. It was a confusing mix of positive and negative attention that left my head spinning. One evening, about a month after the party, Jake and I were sitting in my living room. I had been quiet all day, lost in a fog of depression. "Are you ever going to be okay?" he asked softly, breaking the long silence. "How can I be?" I shot back, my voice thick with emotion. "Look at me. Jake, everything is gone. Ryan is gone." He was quiet for a moment, his eyes studying my face. "Is he asked, or was he just hiding?" I stared at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" "Think about it, man," he said, leaning forward. Ryan was terrified of people. He hid in his hoodies. He never spoke to anyone. He hated being looked at. He was miserable. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'm not saying this is good. This whole thing is insane. But look at you at the party. As Rihanna, you were smiling. You were talking to people. You danced. I've known you my whole life, and I have never seen you look that alive." He took a breath. "Maybe this didn't happen to you. Maybe it happened for you. Maybe Riley is who you were always meant to be. The person Ryan was too scared to admit existed." He had started calling me Riley a few weeks ago. He said it was a placeholder, a name for this new person. But it was starting to stick. Hearing him say it now sent a strange jolt through me. His words hit me harder than any insult ever could have. They scraped away at the layers of denial I had built up and exposed a raw, terrifying truth. Had I been that miserable? Had I hated being myself that much? Was this curse somehow a twisted manifestation of a wish I never even knew I had? The tears started to fall, silent at first, then turning into quiet, racking sobs. Jake didn't try to comfort me. He just sat there, a silent witness. And I cried. But for the first time, I wasn't crying for the boy I had lost. I was crying because, deep down, in a place I was terrified to look, I wasn't sure I wanted to find him again. I was crying for Riley. 3 years can feel like a lifetime. In my case, it was the woman who sat across from the journalist in the bright, airy studio of her downtown loft was not the ghost who had hidden in a gray hoodie, nor the terrified creature wrapped in a bedsheet. She was Riley Monroe. A name I had chosen for myself, a name that felt like mine. I was an independent fashion designer, known for my clean, architectural lines and a certain feminine strength that critics loved. "So your rise has been meteoric," Ms. Monroe, the journalist, a sharp woman named Sarah, said with a smile 3 years ago. "No one knew your name. What's your secret?" I smiled back, a calm, easy gesture that would have been impossible for Ryan. "I think my secret is that I had to learn who I was very quickly. When you go through a major life change, you have 2 choices. You can either let it break you, or you can let it remake you." You've mentioned a major life change before in other interviews, but you've always been very private about it. Sarah probed gently. I took a sip of water, my eyes drifting towards the window that overlooked the city. For a long time, my past was a source of shame and fear. Now, it just felt like a story, my story. "I used to be someone else," I began, my voice steady. "I lived for 22 years as a man, a very shy, very unhappy man named Ryan." Sarah's professional composure flickered for just a second, her eyes widening in surprise. I continued before she could interrupt. "I didn't choose this. It wasn't a gradual transition. It was sudden, unexplained, impossible. One night I went to a party in a costume, and the next morning, the costume was me. I woke up in this body. I gestured to myself. I thought I was cursed. For a long time, I believed my life was over." I paused, letting the weight of my words hang in the air. But I was wrong. My old life was over. That was true. But a new one was just beginning. It was terrifying and painful, and I had to relearn everything: how to walk, how to talk, how to exist in a world that suddenly saw me in a completely different way. But in the process, I found a strength I never knew I had. Ryan was hiding from the world. Riley had to learn to face it head on. In a way, I think that a cruel twist of fate, or maybe a strange kind of magic, gave me the one thing I couldn't find for myself: a chance to be born a second time. The interview concluded soon after. And as Sarah packed up her things, she looked at me with a newfound respect. That's an incredible story. Riley, thank you for sharing it. It's the only one I have, I replied with a shrug and a smile. After she left, the loft was quiet again. My loft, a place I had designed and paid for with my own work. It was filled with light, plants, and bolts of beautiful fabric. It was a home Ryan could never have even imagined. Later that evening, Jake came over, letting himself in with his key, just like he always had. He was carrying a bag of takeout from our favorite Thai place. Some things hadn't changed. "How was the interview?" he asked, setting the containers on my kitchen island. "Good," I told her. He stopped and looked at me. All of it. "The important parts," I clarified, "that I used to be someone else, that I'm happier now." He nodded slowly, a small smile playing on his lips. "Good. It's a story worth telling." Our relationship had evolved into something quiet and deep, something that defied easy labels. He was more than a friend, more than a brother. He was the anchor that had held me steady during the storm. In those first few years, he had been my protector, my teacher, and my only confidant. Now, we were partners in a way, bound by a shared secret and an unbreakable trust. There was an intimacy between us, a comfortable closeness that didn't need a name. He had seen me at my absolute lowest, and he was still here. As we ate, I thought about how much he had changed, too. The reckless prankster was still in there somewhere, but he was tempered by a maturity and a quiet strength I had never seen in him before. The guilt he carried had transformed him, made him a better man. After dinner, while cleaning up, I was organizing some old boxes in my closet. My fingers brushed against a smooth, familiar fabric. I pulled it out. It was the pastel pink dress. I had kept it all these years, tucked away in the back of my closet. For a long time, I couldn't even look at it. It was the symbol of the curse, the catalyst for the death of my old life. But now, holding it in my hands, it felt different. The fabric was soft. The color was hopeful. It wasn't a curse. It was a key. It was the flimsy, ridiculous thing that had unlocked the door to my own prison. I walked over to the full-length mirror in my bedroom, the dress held up against my body. The woman in the reflection was confident and serene. She had my eyes, but they were no longer filled with fear. She was wearing simple, elegant loungewear, her blonde hair tied in a loose bun, her face free of makeup. She was me. A slow smile spread across my face. I looked at the dress, then back at my reflection, and I whispered the words into the quiet of the room, a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever cosmic joke had set my life on this path. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you for letting me become myself." In the mirror, the warm evening light from the window streamed in, bathing my face in a soft glow. The reflection of the sad, lost boy named Ryan was gone for good. There were no ghosts here anymore. There was only Riley, and her smile was peaceful, whole, and finally, completely free.